Welcome back to another GTN Coaches Corner where we answer your questions. You can, of course, leave your questions below this video, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. We could be answering them next week. This week, we've got a whole variety of questions. And the big one we're going to get to is someone really wants us to explain the 10% rule. Ooh. But before we get to that, a few other questions, starting with this one from Ironman 987. Thank you so much for these. You guys are awesome. Quick question. If I'm doing 1.5 to 2 hour zone 2 bike and runs, do I need to fuel or only during higher intensity activities? The quick, simple answer to that is there is far less necessity to fuel in your lower intensity sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you're starting to do a 1.5 to 2 hour run, definitely get yourself fueling.
Yeah, that's quite a long way. Yeah, but there is a but in there. There are some advantages to fueling, even if you don't necessarily need it to get through that session. Firstly, if you fuel during a session, you get far less depleted. So you're essentially fueling, kickstarting your recovery for the next session. The gap between being depleted at the end of that session and the next time you can go out and train is much shorter if you didn't actually get so depleted in that session to begin with. If you actually ate something during the session, you will therefore kickstart your recovery, almost be recovering that glycogen stores before you even finish the session.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you're training yourself to take on fuel during exercise. So win-win,
exactly.
Really.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Good
All right.
for a race.
Next question from CJ Lunt. I'm currently training for a triathlon series consisting of Olympic and sprint distance triathlons. To save time on my T1 and T2, I'm rocking no socks for the bike and run. Do you advise training without socks occasionally, given the increased risk of blisters / losing toenails that may affect other training? Or is it better to just go no socks on race day and deal with the consequences afterwards? Well, first of all, love the commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very much admire that. I guess you've got to weigh up. I mean, going no socks is maybe going to save you 5 or 10 seconds.
Yeah, literally try put your socks on. Just time yourself. Just put your. If it takes you over 10 seconds, you're doing it really, really slowly. It's a quick thing to put your socks on.
However, if you are really committed to this, we would suggest actually just wait until race day and deal with the blisters.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to take 2 or 3 recovery days after a race anyway. You can use those to get over the blisters, pop them, let them get a little bit less tender before you get training again. Don't ruin your training by not using socks in training. I don't think
there's nothing
that's
fun about
going
swimming with blisters as well, with flapping around.
Next question is from Taylor Eckert, and they say, I cycle commute to work mostly every Monday to Friday, which is about 20 minutes and 30-meter elevation gain one way. I also rock pannier packs, so increase weight. Can I factor this work into my training plan to replace the cycling session? I wouldn't say a 20-minute ride, even if you're doing it both ways every day, is necessarily going to replace your cycle sessions. However, you should account for this in your training.
So, James, my training is a 20-minute cycle commute into work a couple of times a week. I don't do any other cycling. So you're saying that's not...
Doesn't count, no.
But it's that or nothing.
Well, if you're preparing for a race, you need to do some specific sessions, and those rides into work and back are not going to replace them. I'm not saying it's nothing. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. Yeah. I'm saying if you are doing those rides every single day, you do need to factor that into your training program. You have to understand it's going to somewhat affect your recovery, it's going to somewhat affect your fatigue levels and your sharpness for the next hard session you do. However, it is not going to replace the hard sessions you do. You're not going to boost any fitness. You may maintain a little bit of fitness by doing that. So there's your bad news, Mark.
I do have about
it's not going to boost your fitness.
10 times the elevation gain that he has just one way. So I think, is that...
No, still anyway, clutching, Mark. You're clutching.
Right. Nathaniel Green, BKNY. Is it better to do back-to-back workouts, one immediately after the other, or to spread them over the course of the day? Oh, this is a good question.
One. Yeah, it really depends how your program was planned. It's fair to say that unless it's otherwise stated, unless your coach said, do this run straight off the bike, or do a brick session, do this as a brick session, it's safe to assume that your coach expected you to spread them out, or whoever derived your program that you're using, expected them to be spread out as much as possible. Morning and evening, or even morning and lunchtime, spread them out. For 2 reasons. The first one being that you will do the session way better if you haven't just got the fatigue from that previous session. And now sometimes you want to train that with a brick run, training for your race. But the rest of the time you want to do the session itself as effectively as possible. And then, of course, the other reason is simply the mental and physical kind of load of doing 2 sessions on top of each other. The logistics, the preparation, the fueling, the hydration, all of those things amplify and get exponentially harder when you start doing one session on top of the other. Cramming that training into one session is definitely not the way to go, unless it's already specified on your program.
I'd say
that's what you should do.
there's probably a balance to this, isn't there? When you're trying to juggle this around work, life commitments, maybe you've got an hour hard turbo session and then there's just a 30-minute easy run. Potentially you could, but you've definitely got to pass that by your coach if you have got a coach. And it is, obviously, as you say,
Are you just trying to get out of the extra shower, Mark, in your day?
Well, I do think you're saying about the mental strain and just the stress around just doing multiple sessions, but actually I would say maybe just that quick turnaround, same kit or whatever, and running, actually that takes a lot of stress out of the day. Yeah,
getting yourself all ready and motivated to get out the door and go for twice in one day might be harder. But yeah, as Mark says,
quality,
run that past your coach, because there is going to be a cost involved in that, probably in the intensity and how effectively you can do that session. For the easy sessions, no problem. But for the other ones, run it by your coach first. On to our penultimate question for the day from Christopher Greaves. Says, hi, and thank you for the channel. I'm binge watching GTN videos while I recover from a quadruple coronary artery bypass surgery. Well, good luck with your recovery. I hope to participate in my first Ironman 7.3 in Melbourne next November. By way of background, I'm 65 plus and have completed several marathons, half marathons, and a couple of ultras. Some sprint triathlons, duathlons, and aquathlons. I'm neither fast nor talented, but I'm fairly persistent.
Nice.
Dr. Sarker returned to graded training by mid-March, so 7.5 months or so to get ready for my 70.3. My question is, what and how many events should I consider including my training to prepare and progress to the 70.3? Well, I think firstly, 7 months is a long time to focus on one event. So it is a good idea to include some, essentially what we call them process goals along the way to that, just to keep you motivated, keep you ticking on, and also give you some benchmarks as you go along the way. So sprint distances, maybe Olympic distance along the way. But I wouldn't put too many in, because you don't want the short races in between to actually affect your consistency in your training.
Yeah, I wouldn't really add any more to that. Presumably, the idea of the 70.3 is purely to complete it rather than trying to be competitive, which is fair enough, and that's great. Personally, if it was me, I would probably sort of have a checklist of sort of like, I'd do a sprint distance, check that was all okay, and then I'd like, right, okay, cool, I'm going to step up to an Olympic distance, check everything goes okay there. I appreciate you have to plan ahead with 70.3s and get yourself entered. So, I think, as long as you just, as James says, that sort of graded return and...
Sounds like you're on the right track.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck with it.
All right, final question, the big one from Vinny the Vano. I don't know why I said it like that. It just sounds like a bit of a gangster name.
Like you should read it like that, yeah.
How much running is too much for a beginner? I'm new to triathlon, but my long-term goals are a 70.3 in 2025 and a full in 2026. I have a background in cycling and I'm confident my swimming is improving quickly, but can't seem to run without getting injuries. I've always been plagued with shin splints and recently calf problems. I've always gone from 0 to half marathon distance. I think we found your issue.
Yeah.
Half marathon distances within a short period of time with minimal prep for charity events such as the Great North Run, usually running the distance in 1 hour 40 and then backing right off running totally due to being in pain. Do we need to go on? Can you provide a bit more information on the 10% rule and what times/distances are sensible to start with?
Thank you, Craig. So it's Craig. Vinny the Vano is actually Craig. 0 to half marathon, as Mark says, is a surefire way to get injured. Even if you've got a decent amount of running in your background, that's a very risky strategy. If you don't have a decent amount of running in your background, you're almost guaranteed to get injured, as you've found, Craig. Now, the reason for this, and this is where people fall into the trap, because it is a little bit confusing. When you start running, you initially feel pretty good, and your aerobic system and your circulatory system adapts pretty quickly. In 4 to 6 weeks, your heart and lungs and even your muscles will feel significantly better doing that exercise at that intensity. The problem is, while that aerobic system has adapted really quickly, your tendons, ligaments, and bones take between 6 weeks to 12 weeks, even longer, 20 weeks, to fully adapt to that new load that you're putting them under. And during that gap where your aerobic system feels great, and your muscles and tendons and ligaments have caught up with it, you're at prime risk for injury. The problem being, then you get injured, so you rest, you recover, you take some time off, you then start again, and you do exactly the same cycle, which is where the 10% rule comes
What
in.
I'm fearing is Craig is going to hear from this that, right, so I actually need to do my half marathon 4 to 6 weeks
In the 4 to 6 weeks before you break, and no, that's not what we're saying. No, we're saying you should institute the 10% rule. Now, the 10% rule is basically a rule of thumb. It's not a strict rule.
Yeah, it's not black and white 10%,
No.
but it's good to kind of follow and adhere to loosely.
Yeah. Essentially, it's that you shouldn't increase your training load by more than 10% week on week. Now, a lot of people just use volume to substitute load because it's hard to justify, to judge how much load you've added. If you're running a little bit harder, a little bit faster, you're doing maybe some intervals, how much load have you actually added? But if you're adding intervals, or you're adding faster running, or you're adding more intense running, then you have increased the load, even if you kept the volume the same. So therefore, don't add 10% distance at the same time, intensity. You can't add more than 10% load week on week. Now, that means if you ran 10 Ks last week, you should only be running 10.5 Ks the following, or 11 Ks at most the following week. And if you ran 20 Ks, you shouldn't be running 22 the following week. And that's if you keep the intensity the same. If you are adding intensity, don't even go up to 22 Ks. Yeah. Keep it at 20 Ks and just add the intensity. And this is where people start getting frustrated. They feel like it's really slow and the progress is really slow. But trust us. Give your muscles, tendons, and ligaments time, and that 10% rule can save you a whole lot of agony down the line and stop that roller coaster where you feel great, you train hard, you're injured, you're back at square one, and you start again.
I feel like this has been a bit of an education for me as well, actually. So.
But you've got a good history of running, so you can jump straight into it.
Can I? Anyway.
You're not as young as you used to be, Mark, so I'd start paying a bit more attention to that rule.
Well, yeah, great questions. Please do keep them coming in. Use that hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Leave them in the comment section below any video. We'll pick them up and we'll hopefully be answering your question very soon. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. See you next time.